Welcome to another episode of Sabine's Common Sense. I'm your host, Sabine the Purpose Lawyer. Thank you for listening and thank you for helping me be on purpose. So today I'm going to be talking about protecting your creative and in a different way than I normally talk about. So it'll be some new information for you guys. One of my team members had put me onto Grownish, which you may know of. It's an offshoot of the show Blackish, which is very successful. And so there are some legal issues that came up in the episode regarding, interning and rights to creatives that I think it would make sense for us to talk about. So we're going to get into that. And then I have the pleasure of interviewing my producer, Mr. Josh Wilcox. He is super knowledgeable in the arena of podcasting and media. He has produced thousands of podcast episodes. So he's really going to let us know the business of podcasting along with what it is to have a good podcast. So you want to stick around for that as we get into that. All right. So Grownish, right? So what happened on the episode is that the young lady, and forgive me because I do not remember her name, but she basically had, she was in an internship and Lala Anthony was her boss essentially. And what she had was like some sort of, I want to say like a clothing line that she was working at. And so she was dealing with the big boss. And one day she was doodling a drawing and the boss kind of saw it, commented on it, said it was nice or what have you. Next thing you know, she actually created her design, not only created her design, but was full on marketing it, ready to put it out and everything like that. And so I thought that was interesting because she didn't even really get a chance to protect what she was doing because she actually was in the midst of drawing it. But it raised up a lot of things for me because people don't realize often when you have other people working for you, like creatives, in your business that are, creating artwork for you, creating designs for you, creating, any sort of creation that someone is doing for you, whether they're an employee or they're somebody who you've contracted to do. You really need to have an agreement in place called a work for hire agreement. And what that work for hire agreement does is really outlines who owns what, right? Who owns what, who has the rights to what. And it could be very simple, but it could also get very technical because it sort of depends on what you want that creation for and what you're going to do with it. And there's also different levels of leverage, right? If somebody is just an intern at a place and they're going to be actually creating things, then most likely they're not going to have a lot of leverage and most likely they're going to be giving away the rights to whatever it is that they're creating. But you as the creator, if you're out there listening, you should know that you want to make sure that what you are creating, you want to give it away, right? You want to make sure that you're not creating something that you actually would prefer to have the ownership rights to. Because once you sign that agreement that says your boss doesn't, your boss owns everything and you have no rights to it, then you're sort of, giving everything up. And if that's what you intend to do, great, cool. Sometimes you do that because of where you are in life, but sometimes, you are actually creating things that are extremely valuable and you want to get sort of recognized for that. So these agreements can be as simple as, like I said, you're giving away all your rights, or it could be you're giving away rights to part of it, like when you're doing coding for someone. So say you're, coding software, you may be keeping rights to your base code or part of the code that you use to create software for other people, or you may be giving away the whole thing. But you kind of need to know exactly what it is. And for those of you who are business owners and you're hiring people to do work in your business, you want to make sure that that's clear as well, especially as it relates to intellectual property, because when it comes to creating logos or creating designs or creating anything that's creating value in your business or that's going to produce value in your business, you want to make sure that you are the person who owns it at the end of the day and that the person who you hired is not retaining any ownership. And a lot of times people fall into this when they hire companies like Fiverr or Upwork, depending on the agreement that they're entering into, either with the company or with the contractor that they're doing work for, there may be some carve-outs where they are keeping part of your creation or keeping some rights to what they've created for you so that they could use it for marketing, use it for advertising. But then when they do that, your stuff is sort of out there. And if it's out there before you protected it, that might cause some problems for you, right? So in this situation with the young lady in Grownish, what she could have done or should have done was pretty much safeguarded what she was working on, right? Like if she didn't want anyone to know about it or if she didn't want anyone to take it, she probably shouldn't have been drawing something that was of value at her work that wasn't related to her work. So you kind of take the risk when you're just in the creation phase. The other thing that she could have done is after she had created it is to copyright it, right? So if you create a drawing, that is something that falls under the arena of intellectual property, but it falls under the space of copyright. And it would have been something easy for her to do to protect her rights in that. So now when somebody sees it, it's like, okay, great. Now we can negotiate because I own it. And now we can talk about what you want to pay for it, right? And so those are just some things I wanted to share with you. Make sure that you have your agreements in place. No matter what side of the table that you're on, it's important for you to understand the value of having your contracts in writing. Because you can fall into a lot of loss and a lot of hurt. And we'll get into that a little bit in the interview. So follow me and we'll go talk to my guest. Hey, Josh.
How's it going, Sabine?
I'm good. How are you?
It's interesting being on this side of the fence for the first time in a pretty long time. So
I can imagine. Yeah. Josh is Mr. Josh Wilcox. He is a producer. He's been in and around music and media for a very long time. And we met here at Brooklyn Podcasting Studio.
Yes, this is my studio.
Yeah, he's just super knowledgeable at what he does. And I was just like really impressed by it. And we actually got introduced because of Nadine, who also comes here.
Yeah. What's it called? I actually, in full disclosure, you helped me out with a transition of making this business officially 100% mine. Awesome. And I really enjoyed the process. You have a great team and something that I'm hoping to, I've watched you scale and heard some of your stories of how you scaled your business. And I'm trying to take a little bit of that knowledge and apply it here. But yeah, I had a great experience with you and your team.
Thanks so much, Josh. I appreciate that. Yes, Josh is also a client, happy to say. And yeah, so we started building this relationship. But Josh, you have been in this industry for a very long time. How did you get started?
Honestly, it all happened through like an epiphany that I had on the train. So well, first you kind of mentioned that I started off in music. So I had worked in the music industry for a while, mostly as an audio engineer. Okay. And then I never stopped being an audio engineer. Obviously, I'm doing it as we're doing a session right now. Right. For people who don't know out there, yes, I am recording myself.
Right. He's multitasking.
Multitasking during this right now.
That's talent.
But yeah, I started off working in music and, I went to school for audio engineering and I worked in a couple of different studios. Most notably, like I worked for Jim Jones for a little bit of time in his studio.
What was that experience like?
Interesting. Very, very interesting. I was just saying I learned a lot. Okay. I definitely enjoyed a lot of things. There was a lot of things I didn't like. Right. Most notably though, like I got a lot of confidence from that studio, both with the good and the bad. I really learned how to just, work and put my head down and just work despite the fact there were a lot of distractions.
I'm sure this was like what? In what era was
So this was kind of like before, this is like after his, major hit Ballin', a few years removed. Okay. A few years removed from that. And I think Dipset had like their little breakup at the time, but they were kind of reforming back together and stuff like that. Okay. But I spent most of the time, I recorded a few of Jim's tracks, to be honest with you, but I mostly recorded for his label that now I think is getting ready to restart itself, called Bird Gang. Oh, okay. So like I ended up recording like a lot of those artists and a lot of like their early stuff. So
Okay. So that must have been cool because that was just like sort of the height of their sort of popularity.
Yeah. I'm not going to lie. It was pretty cool. Like the studio, one of the coolest parts about it was like the studio, I'm not going to give the address or anything like that, but it was somewhere in Midtown where a lot of other like really famous studios are.
Okay.
And it was on like the 8th or 9th floor or something like that. And I like this perfect view of like the Empire State Building and stuff like that.
That's
and
dope.
like, and you could see like the sort of the lights coming off the building and the clouds and stuff like that. So like I was working with that as like the backdrop.
Wow. So did you feel like it was sort of like dream come true at the time, or?
Initially, yes. I mean, the funny part is when I ended up getting that gig. Largely because this is the only time where I actually got that gig largely because of my degree, actually. The school I went to was Full Sail, and a Full Sail grad was the main engineer at the studio, and he was looking for help because he was really Jim's main engineer. And he was like, well, if you've done this before, he's like, if you've gone to the school, I know you know your stuff. So he was the one that got me in there. And initially, I was just like, oh my God, I when I went into the studio, I didn't know who owned the studio. I didn't know who I would be working for or anything like that. And then, I just opened the main control room and there's Jim Jones just sitting there.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, it was one of those things where like you're starstruck for half a second.
Yeah, and you're like,
you're trying to play it off like everything's cool.
Yeah.
Got home, obviously was cheesing, told my girlfriend, who's now my wife, about it and everything like that. So yeah, it was initially kind of like that. But like I said, it was there was a lot of good and bad experiences there. I felt a little underappreciated, which is ultimately the reason why I left after about a year of being there. But I'll ultimately say, though, I feel like that was also partly on me. I was kind of pretty young. And I really didn't know how to like advocate for myself. I do think the people that I ended up recording, especially most of the artists, like they did appreciate me. But I think, it's kind of like that phrase, like closed mouths don't get fed.
Yeah, so, you're so right about that.
And they appreciated me, but like when I wanted to get paid, what I felt I would deserve to get paid or just be treated in a certain manner, it's like I didn't have the words or the confidence to speak up for myself at that time. So
I love that you bring that up because I definitely have had that experience myself. And it's easy to sort of like blame the environment, blame the people that you're around, you know, and then, if you have enough foresight to like look inwards to be like, you know what? I had a part and I could have done X, Y, Z. So I think it's important for people to know, like, when you're in situations that either could be opportunities or just always like a growth situation, to evaluate how you could have done better and then do that the next time.
Exactly. Because I mean, there were instances where they did come and ask me, like, is there, what can we do for you? And I still, even in that instance, don't get me wrong, there weren't many instances where and this was after many months of doing very quality work for them. But at the same time, like, when that opportunity arose, I think I was a little bit, for lack of better words, bitter. And because I was a little bitter, that I just didn't even, I didn't even speak up for myself at that point. So,
and there's something to be said about not being able to receive things at a certain period of time.
Yeah, that's a fact.
Yeah, because I've gone through that as well, like where I know that people have done wonderful things for me, and because it wasn't exactly how I pictured it, to be, I didn't appreciate it. And so it's like you sort of missed that opportunity that, you couldn't receive the love, you couldn't receive what they were trying to do, even though it may not have been in the best package.
Yeah. I mean, I don't regret it. I mean, I don't regret it because I really am enjoying what I'm doing now. But at the same time, I won't lie. I'd be lying if I said that I, at some point in time, thought about like, oh, what if I had actually, had the foresight and the confidence to be like, pay me this.
Yeah.
And I need these things.
Yes, I feel you on that one. So how did you decide to go to engineering school? You said you went to one of the best schools for engineering. How did you decide that?
So initially, like, I really got into music through DJing. Like, I DJ'd when I was pretty young in high school. And and I think that was really the gateway for me to try to figure it out. Like, I tried to tell my parents, who were really supportive, but like, obviously when they hear like, oh, your kid wants to go into music, especially considering like I was a pretty good student. I was pretty, I had other things that I had interest in too. Like I was pretty good at writing. I was also pretty good at science. So like I kind of felt like I could do a whole bunch of different things, but I really, when I got into DJing, like I really liked this music thing. So, and I was initially going to go to school to quote unquote be a DJ and we're also talking like maybe, cause I graduated high school in 2004, I think, or something like that. So, at that time, there really were like, now there's DJ schools everywhere and audio schools everywhere and stuff like that. But back then, there really wasn't that many. And there definitely weren't any that were accredited. So,
Gotcha.
so my parents weren't really too keen on me doing that. But the other job that I knew that was out there was like audio engineering. And at that time, like my music chops, like I think every audio engineer, like secretly, they want to be a producer. Like everybody, anybody who, any audio engineer that's out there that gets into music, like honestly, like they're all trying to be producers. They're all trying to be producers.
Keeping it real.
Yeah. But so I was like, oh, I'll do that. And that's kind of what got me into it, because I figured like the closest I could, my mindset was the closer I could be to the music, the better it is.
Okay.
So, but that's essentially what got me in the door.
Yeah. Okay. That's cool. So then you went there, you got this cool opportunity to work for Jim Jones. So what happens next after that?
So what happens next is, one of the other reasons why I decided I wanted to leave was because, like I said, every audio engineer wants to be a secret producer. And one of the cool things I got to witness was, these producers would come around, like people who I didn't even know, producers, some of them I knew.
Okay.
Like I got to meet a few like relatively famous producers that I was like, oh, I know who you are.
Okay.
The general public might not know who you are, but I know who you are. But I know who you are. But some of these guys were completely unknown, and they would come in with like just gang loads of tracks, like just of great music. And they would play them, They would play them for, the artists in the studio, and they would pick beats or whatever. And sometimes like right there on the spot, like I'd see somebody hand that producer a check for X amount of dollars.
Really?
And I'm not talking about a small pocket change either. Like, here's $5,000-$10,000 for this beat or whatever, or something like that. Or, not all of them were that big, but, they get paid right there on the spot, showing up in sweats and flip-flops.
Right. And they're just like, I'm at work. I'm about to broker a deal.
All I'm doing here is smoking weed, playing some beats for these people, walk out with a check. And I was like, I want to do that.
That's the job for me.
And the thing is, during this time, I'd always been like working on, my own, producing my own music, working on my own beats and stuff like that. So, I went into so I was like, I'm gonna do that.
Okay.
And the thing is, during this entire time, like I had also been working like a full-time, day job.
Okay.
And eventually I ended up working, I cut down my hours, and I said, I'm gonna work part-time and focus more on,
your music.
Focus more on my music and stuff like that. And, I would say I had some relative success with that, but I also kind of focused on something a little bit different too. Yes, I worked with artists, but I also focused more on trying to license music to, for like TV, music, and film. Because one thing I think a lot of like music producers or anybody that's looking to get into music is usually just solely thinking about, I guess selling their music to a certain extent, even though that's still a really rough thing and hard thing to do nowadays.
I'm sure. I was going to say, like, you made it sound like it's easy for them to, but it's like a lot of people, produce and do beats. I'm sure there's many of you out there who do so, and it's difficult.
Yeah, a lot of people who are in it know the hustle. And then I was just like, or if you're an artist, you're thinking about like, selling merch and touring, and that's how you make your money. But, but I wasn't an artist. But I think the lane that I think a lot of people sort of overlook is that licensing. And the truth of the matter is about licensing that I think a lot of people don't realize. Like, yes, you want to make good quality music, but the type of music that gets licensed for stuff isn't necessarily the stuff you always hear on the radio, or the best stuff that's like the hottest thing that's going on right now. A lot of stuff that gets licensed, even some big producers will tell you like, hey, I licensed stuff that was like, some stuff that was just shelved, some stuff that I thought was cheesy, horrible, whatever, but it works for this particular product, or it works for this particular commercial and stuff like that. And, for me, full disclosure for anybody who's listening out there, like I never made a ton of money doing this. So like, I'm not trying to sit here and say that I was uber successful at this, but I licensed like a couple songs for TV shows. It ended up getting me a couple of cheeseburgers. So like not all licenses are built the same or anything like that. Just because there's no getting me wrong. Like I was very excited when I got my $30 check in the mail.
Right. But that's good because it's like, you loved what you were doing.
Yeah.
So you continued to do it despite the fact that at that time you hadn't gotten to the level that you wanted to be at.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but ultimately, like, I would say that like I learned a lot. I knew a lot business wise because I also in conjunction to going to school for audio engineering, like I also got a entertainment business degree along with it too.
Okay.
So that's another reason why like I kind of knew not to put all my eggs sort of all in one basket in terms of like trying to create multiple revenue streams for myself as a producer, seeing like all the ways that I could possibly make money off of the music that I was making.
That's awesome. So you had the licensing, which you learned how to do that. And so you were a value add there.
Yeah.
And then you knew how to produce and you knew how to write music. And so all these different avenues you were gaining basically revenue from.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I essentially had like 3 revenue streams when I was working in music, at least post, working at Jim Jones's studio. So like I had the I was still trying to seek out artists that I really wanted to work with, and that was something that I really wanted to make sure of, to only work with artists that I really felt strongly about. And I actually did produce like an EP with a R&B singer.
Oh, awesome.
I'll be honest with you, like in hindsight, like I think you always feel like you could do better and whatnot, but at the time, but I'm not ashamed of that body of work.
Okay.
Like that. I'm not trying.
Is there anyone we know?
Not really.
Not really. Okay.
not really, but wherever she's at, I hope she's doing well.
Okay.
But I had that, was trying to work angles with that. I was trying to sell beats and instrumentals to artists, so there was another revenue stream there, and then the licensing. So those were really the 3 avenues that I was trying to pursue, and I did that for about 2 years before pivoting to podcasts.
Okay, that's dope. So for those of you out there who are interested in getting into producing, right?
Yeah.
There are multiple ways of making money, and then now cut to the digital age, right? Where everything is there's like, I'm sure there's even more ways to have.
There's a lot more. Income. Yeah, there's a lot more opportunities now. I think it's don't get me wrong, like there's a lot of don't get me wrong, like it's a lot of competition. It's still very hard, but I would say because of like, not to say that I didn't have like smartphones and all these other avenues too for me, but even more so now, there's so many ways to be able to promote and get your name out there. So, you don't have to be as reliant on, other people in order to be able to get your name out there. So,
right. Okay, cool. So let's dig in a little bit deeper on the licensing that you were doing at this particular studio. How exactly did you go about that?
Well, I wasn't really doing it at any particular studio. It was really like, it was at my home studio.
Oh, okay.
But like the licensing that I was doing in terms of licensing my own music, I mean, there was lots of different sorts of like deals and contracts that were going along with that. And this is like where like some of like the entertainment business sort of knowledge that I had kind of came into play from the degree I got from Full Sail. But which I know some people from Full Sail is just like, I didn't really use that degree at all.
But you did.
Yeah, but I did. But I did a little bit. I think I'll kind of give you like my thinking about it. So like whenever I finished a track, right, I would kind of assess like its viability in terms of like if licensability is a word, how licensable this track is. And where do I see it? Like, you have to kind of like, once you finish it, where do you envision it being, is it something that you think could be in an advertisement? Do you think it's something that could fit in a particular movie scene? Is it something that could fit in, as something that's in a TV show or something like that? These are all sorts of things that I would try to assess once I finished a track. I tried not to create tracks, based on a particular scene or anything like that. But every once in a while, I would get these things that were, we'll just call them, I think they were called briefs from different like music supervisors. And for people out there who aren't familiar with the music supervisors, these are people who these are the people that are in charge of choosing the music for the things that we hear in TV's commercial films and stuff like that.
So that's a job.
Yeah, it's a pretty,
that's a career.
It's a pretty cool job. I'm not gonna lie. Like if there was another career path, that might have been it too.
Wow. It's not too late.
Yeah. Yes, essentially it's like you're like being a DJ for, for
movies
and film and stuff like that. So it's pretty cool. But they would get these, I would get these briefs and they would say like they're looking for music in this style, they tell you the genre. They usually give you like a reference track, they're usually something relatively popular.
Like sounds a little something like this. Okay.
Yeah, they'd be pretty explicit about like what, or pretty specific about like what they were looking for and stuff like that. So you're trying to sort of, hopefully you have a track in your catalog or something that you could make in time for whenever that needed to be submitted. But in terms of like the deals, so like if you were being considered for it, if they ended up choosing your track, or even just you're in the running or something like that, they would kind of send you like a template sort of contract for that. And sometimes it would be things like a work for hire and
so work for hire is an agreement that basically allows you to decide who's going to own what as part of this relationship. Yeah. So how did you guys sort of work that out?
So, I mean, a lot of times, I'll be honest with you, as a producer that is not well known, and,
right.
and at the time couldn't really afford lawyers or anything like that. Like, you don't really have a lot of leverage in terms of negotiating too many things, depending on who you're dealing with. I mean, sometimes you could. I'm not going to say like I never did or anything like that. But if the end client is Coca-Cola, for example, like there's not
this
really.
This is the agreement.
This is the agreement, and you're going to sign this if you want to get this money. So,
and I'll just add there, it's because if they're sort of paying for whatever it is, the products, the music, the audio, they want to make sure that they're free to use it however they want, and so that goes into why you need to have that paperwork in place for them on the business side, and for you as the artist, you're dealing with your leverage, your power, and your authority within the market. So you do what you got to do.
Exactly. And like, and just to be like, sort of like even more specific about it, like, not in every case, but a lot of the work for hire cases, and the thing is like, I would also sometimes get them for work that I engineered too, you know what I'm saying? Okay. So it's like, it's really about how it really kind of depends upon like, they're pretty much saying, are we going to pay you? Not all the time. Are we paying you in royalties or are we paying you as a lump sum? And typically, if it's a work for hire, they're just going to pay you a lump sum that you and them agree upon. So, and what I will say is like, usually when you're doing a work for hire sort of situation, like, yes, the lump sum can be very enticing. And to be honest, most of the time I took it because I didn't really feel like, sometimes you're going to know there's really not going to be a ton of royalties or anything. Right.
So depending on what it's being used for.
Depending on what it's being used for, there's really, that it's not going to be, you're not going to really see a lot of back end royalties for that sort of thing. But I think what it is once you complete a piece of music and you assess what it can be used for and kind of like how good it is too. Right. If you have a track and even if you're not even talking about licensing for ads, for example, right? Okay. Which is even different between licensing to an artist, right? Okay. And this is like somebody where you're not really directly involved with the artist. Like, for example, there are websites out there like BeatStars, which is a very popular website, and others too, where you see a whole bunch of producers will have like their beats on there. Okay. And then the person who's the artist can go on there and choose, or just someone who's looking for music can go in there and choose the level of quote unquote like ownership, quality and ownership of that track. Now, if you have a really good track that you believe could potentially be a hit, you're going
to ask for royalties on something like that.
You can ask for royalties or something like that. Or, for example, like if the most expensive thing that usually you can buy on a website like that is you buy the exclusive rights. So if you buy the exclusive rights, usually that means the person is buying that beat from you or that track from you outright, and then you don't own it anymore. But usually, like, as a smart business person would do, and obviously you're going to put a very high premium on that, because at that point in time that means that you no longer own that track, and at that point you can't license it anymore. And the benefit of being able to license it, do something that you continue to own, is that like you can, as long as you're not giving away all the rights to it, like even though you might only get like maybe someone wants to license it for $25 for you still own that. You still own
it. So you can keep reusing it.
Yeah. Meaning like thousands of people could buy your $25 license, for, theoretically forever.
Yeah.
So that's the reason why if you're going to do the exclusive route, or if someone's going to buy, or if you're going to put a price on the exclusive, you got to make sure that it's a high dollar amount.
That's super dope, because so now you see, when you protect what you've created and you are able to sort of like exploit it, there's a lot of money there. So you can license it, you can sell it, you could sell it to somebody for exclusive use, but you know that if you're selling and you're, giving away all your rights to it, that there's a higher value there, just like, Josh really said. So all of that has to be accounted for when you're negotiating these type of deals, these type of transactions, because you want to make sure that you're adequately being compensated for what you're creating.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So what made you pivot to podcasting?
The short answer is I wasn't making any money.
Okay.
But I did it, like, one thing I will say is, like, I did all these steps, like, because I kind of pivoted multiple times.
Okay.
On all of this is within the last, like, maybe 6 or 7 years. I pivoted multiple times. But I always kind of did it a little bit strategically. Like, when I decided to work part-time and then eventually I stopped working part-time, I saved up money in order to do all of these things.
Okay.
So, like, I was never, when I say, like, I wasn't making any money, but I literally saved money from working full-time and part-time. I was still tucking away lots and lots of money, so that, like, when I knew there were times where I wasn't making a paycheck or getting any money, I wasn't missing out on rent or anything like that.
Gotcha.
I lived a very, very frugal lifestyle. I still do to a very large extent. But yeah, like, I made all these moves strategically. And what made me pivot to podcasts was, like, I wasn't making any money. But the bigger thing was, like, my relationship to me making music was not as what I thought it would be after a while. Like, I'd gotten a lot better as a producer. I'd gotten a lot better as an engineer, but, like, it wasn't as rewarding for me as it was when it was one thing when you were doing it just for fun.
Right.
And a lot of people tell you this too, when you make your passion the thing that,
earns a living.
It really does change your relationship with it. And it's not that I really began to hate it or anything like that, but it was just because, I was actually liking the stuff that I was making, but I also was realizing the stuff that I wanted to make wasn't necessarily the most commercially viable stuff.
Oh, I understand.
I realized that I had a very niche sort of sound, and it wasn't something that, especially considering I was really focused on where, like, the big dollars were for the licensing and stuff like that. Like, they always want very happy, cheerful, like, especially like advertisements are where some of the biggest paydays are.
Okay.
And there were some times where I was like, you're competing with a lot of people, and, like, I knew I was like, oh, my song is a finalist for something that could pay me $10,000, and knowing that you lost out to the one other person that was being considered. So,
wow.
Like that stuff, having moments like that made you feel good in the moment. You're like, hey, I got my tracks are good enough for someone to want to pay me this sort of money, but also at the same time, but when you don't get that opportunity, you're like, it's kind of like a catch-22. But
yeah. So you felt like you fell out of love with it. Did you feel like the time was wasted, or did you feel like it was good to be able to discover?
That's a good question. Well, I don't really believe any time is ever wasted, because there's a lot that there's that saying, you learn a lot more from your losses than your wins.
Yeah,
and let me tell you something. For anybody who's listening, I lost a lot.
Okay.
I took a lot of L's.
Okay.
I definitely don't think it was wasted, because well, I would say a lot of the things that I learned business-wise in terms of time management for myself, and it was also just in terms of just like general business practices, how to work efficiently,
right?
And a lesson that I'm still learning is how to put a team around you and stuff like that.
Okay.
I think a lot of those things I learned the hard way, but but I've
nonetheless.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I feel you on that, because, like, even things that I wish that I had made better decisions about or had done in a different way. There's always times where I may be going through something, present, and I'm like, oh, I see how that piece of information comes full circle. And so I agree. I don't think there's anything that's, ever lost. Whatever reason that was your path, that was your path. And I'm sure it will all tie. It has tied in, but all will continue to tie in.
Yeah.
So tell me about your transition to podcasting, and what's your relationship with that now?
So, like, I've been doing, I guess you could say I've been in the podcast world for about 5 years now, going on maybe 5.5 years now. So how that really came about was literally, I had like a talk with my, I had a talk with, at the time, my then fiance, now wife. I had a talk with her because one of the things, because like, I think we knew that we were eventually going to get married and we were trying to move together and stuff like that in terms of like both of our career paths and stuff like that. And I told her, like, when I quit my job, when I even quit the part-time job, I was like, look, I'm going to give myself a year to try to figure this thing out. And, I wouldn't say I didn't figure it out, but I figured out like, whether I'm going to continue with this or not. And I decided, and I decided not in the same capacity, like, or this isn't working clearly. So I was literally on the train one day and I was listening to a podcast, and I don't remember what podcast it was, but I just kind of had a legit epiphany. And I was just like, I know how to make one of these. I know exactly what goes into making one of these because I've been working with audio since I was a teenager at this point. You know what I'm saying? Like I've been editing audio like damn near my entire life. And even though like I'd only been working on it in a music capacity, audio is still audio. That really doesn't change. Like all the same skills that you need in order to edit audio and music pretty much all translate or cross over into what you need to do for podcasting. And in many ways, if you've been working in music for a while, like the secret is it's a lot easier. It's actually a lot easier. Don't get me wrong. There are instances where like scripted podcasts, for example, where you got to add like music and sound effects and all these things to make it sort of like theater of the mind. Like those kind of stuff is just as challenging as putting together a music track and stuff like that. But sort of like, but the difference between, I would say the degree of difficulty between, creating a finished music track versus a podcast episode. Oh no, yeah, way easier. I mean, I could spend a whole week on a track. Weeks on one track. For a podcast episode, I'm done in 20 minutes.
Look at that. And that goes back to what we were saying, how like you never know how your skills will translate into the next thing, and you're like, oh shoot, all of these things apply here. I'm already good at this, so that's good. Never taking anything for granted.
I think the hard part was just or the part that was a little bit of a leap of faith, but what I would say was a relatively easy leap of faith in a way, was just the fact of like I was like, I know that I can create these things, but now that I'm thinking about seeking employment in this area, I need to be able to convince somebody that, hey, I can do this very, very well.
Very well.
Like, I know I can do this very, very well, even though I've never done it before. And so how it happened was oddly enough, Craigslist has actually gotten me just about every single job that I've ever gotten, which is really.
Do you guys even know what Craigslist is?
I know. Shout out to Craigslist. Craigslist has been like a really big savior for me in life, and I don't know why it's been so pivotal.
Right, you're one of those people who it just works for.
Even me initially meeting my initial business partner for this place happened through Craigslist as well.
Wow. Okay.
Essentially, what happened was
from your epiphany.
From my epiphany, and thank you, because I was losing my train of thought there. I was on Craigslist and I was looking for job listings specifically for podcasting, and I saw an ad in a relatively big podcast called The Human Experience that I'm not sure if it's actually still going on right now. But the host of the show was looking for a brand new editor / producer. And I was like, okay. And so I reached out to him and sent him my resume, and he's just like, well, your resume sounds impressive, but you've never done podcasting before. And he's just like, but I'm going to ask you to submit a demo with like a bunch of other people, and, whoever submits the best demo to me wins. And pretty much what we had to do was repurpose like 3 already existing episodes of his, and kind of put them in. Yeah. And I was just like, and kind of make like a best of sort of thing. So I was just like, you know what? I'm going to show this guy everything that I can do. Like, it was kind of like the demo, I'm not going to lie, it was very extra.
Okay.
like it was.
You was like, I'm going to shoot my shot. I got one shot. I'm not going to blow it.
Yeah. So I was like, I'm going to show him everything that I can do. And then he's like, and then he chose mine out of like 50 other applicants.
That's dope.
Yeah. And I was just like, and he was just like, yeah, everybody else kind of gave me the same thing. You gave me something really different. And granted, he's like, I don't need you to do all those things.
Right.
He's just, but he's like, but knowing that you can do all of those things means like gave me ideas for future episodes and stuff like that. So, so we worked together for, the host of the show is who I was working for. His name is Xavier Katana. Okay. And I ended up working with him for about 2 years. And and his podcast was big, but we even helped him grow a little bit more. The production value definitely stepped up. Got it. And I say that with all the humbleness,
humility.
All the humility.
He's definitely very humble.
And, because like the one thing I noticed too was like, we can improve X, Y, and Z. We should be doing I kind of gave him some ideas in terms of like we can do ads and like what we should put in them. So I wrote some copy for those sorts of things. We got some. I told him like we should get some testimonials because we had a pretty big following. Like just to give it some context. And to me, like numbers aren't everything, but like we had a very, very large community. Like I'd probably say on the low end we averaged around maybe 12,000 listens per episode. In a given like over like maybe a week or two, and then on the high end we could have 80,000. So like just depended on the guests. And we had some high profile guests. Like some, I would say like none of them are like super duper like like celebrities or anything like that, but they're all like very well known experts in their field. Like a lot of people. Some of these people have been like featured on Joe Rogan and stuff like that. So
So if followers of the podcast knew who was who, that's dope.
Yeah, so I did.
So you mentioned something about writing copy and things like that, and I know you're very good with sort of like words and kind of like saying things in such a way to get the audience's attention. How did you build that skill set?
I'd probably say first and foremost, I'd have to thank like my freshman year like English teacher.
Shout out to the English teacher.
Yeah, who was a huge pain in the ass, but I was always a good writer. And I kind of I've always like thought in the back of my mind, if I didn't go the music route, I probably would have did something like a journalist or something like that. So I'd always kind of been good at writing, especially after being taught by that teacher. But what I think it is that like naturally, like I like to speak with as much clarity as possible. And like I think is like when I listen to people, and this might be quote unquote, you can call it a gift or whatever, but like when I hear when I hear people talk, what I realize is like a lot of people don't know how to express themselves with a lot of clarity.
Gotcha. Yes, I've experienced that too.
And I think it's a very difficult thing to do, and I think I struggle with it even speaking wise, sometimes. But I think I naturally had that gift. But I think the other thing is when I initially started the studio, the one thing I knew I was not interested in doing was simply recording people. I was bored of that. I was really, I'll be honest with you. That was not my main interest to wanting to get into podcasting. Like, at least when I was starting the studio, like I wanted to be a space where I could actually try to help people be the best that they could be, And I think part of it was, I took some of the things that I learned while, working for the Human Experience podcast. But I would probably say a lot of the things that, in full disclosure, yes, I've helped you and told you some things, some critiques and stuff like that.
He's been coaching me behind the scenes with really good insight, that has helped me too. I feel like I've been growing, as I've been going through this podcast, and this podcast is young if you guys been following. And so you really have I don't know, it's just like you really have a way with sort of making things like I'll say, okay, this is what I want to talk about. And like he'll flip it and it'll be like, dang, Josh, it's like 3 seconds you came up with it. And I'm an attorney, so like, but go ahead.
Yeah, I think being able to speak with clarity, and then I would probably say like the two things, and you're going to hear me, you've heard me say this to you before, so to you, this is nothing new. Right. But like, for anybody who's looking to start a podcast out there, if you're out there, listening to this, watching this, and you're interested in starting a podcast, like speaking with clarity, like when you're speaking, whatever you're doing, whatever you're trying to express, you have to express it with clarity, but then it also has to be compelling. Those are like the two things. If you are able to to effectively communicate doing those two things, you should have a good product. Like literally, like that's really what it comes down to. Because a lot of people either fail at one of those two things or fail at both of those things.
Okay.
You know, and a lot of it is how there's a lot of people that have like very interesting things to say, and they have great voices, you know. That's the thing that I think that I find, you know, I'm so compelled to help people with this because like I find it frustrating when I see somebody that has, I know, something really great information or something really good to say, and people really need to hear this, but they can't express it in a way where people will actually tune into them, and that's where I believe that's where I most try to help people in that department. So
yeah, that's awesome, and I agree, because it's a lot of times people think that they're speaking clearly or they're communicating clearly, but on the other end you're like, I'm sorry, what?
Yeah.
So, and I deal with that with clients having to explain to me scenarios or what they want to do, and so I always have to like break it down. But from the creative perspective, it's different, right?
Yeah.
You want to really you want to give people what they care about and how they care about hearing it. So I totally understand that. So Josh, what are some of the benefits of having a podcast when you already have like your main business, but you add a podcast on to, I guess, as marketing?
I think, obviously there's many different reasons to start a podcast. You know, people do it for personal reasons. It's like a passion project of theirs. You know, there's many good reasons, but I would say like from a business perspective, like if you're a business owner, an entrepreneur out there, and like you're quote unquote looking to, I hate saying that word, build your brand, but it's a real thing.
It definitely is a thing. Yeah.
So especially if you are a person who you're really like the face of your company and everything like that. You know, I think in today's day and age, especially people who are, you know, a little bit younger, I'd probably say if like you're under the age of 45, there's that term, the passion economy is a real thing. And people really want to really more so than ever care about where they're spending their money and who they're spending their money on. So I really believe a podcast can allow for people to get to know you, the person, like behind what you're trying to do, why you're trying to do it, and they get to know you. I think all of that helps in terms of whether or not they will decide to ultimately, you know, buy your products or services. I mean, I think I would say that's true for me. Like for the most part, like, you know, I mean, yes, you know, like anybody else, I buy stuff from big names and big brands and stuff
Amazon,
like that.
We're not BFFs with Bezos.
What's it called? Jeff manages to get my money all the time.
Damn it, Jeff. Even when I don't want to spend with you.
No, I try to go out of my way not to give Jeff all my money. But the truth of the matter is you know, I think all that stuff really matters when it comes to all that stuff really matters when it comes to people, you know, caring about where they're spending their money.
Right.
And, you know, don't get me wrong, like I will tell I do believe in, you know, monetizing your podcast, like, you know, like I mentioned earlier, but the truth of the matter is like, you know, if you're looking at podcasting as a purely like a money-making venture, there are a lot better ways to make money
than having a
podcast. Like there's a lot better business ventures. A podcast can be a business venture on its own, but I wouldn't say it's the easiest or fastest way to go about.
Right. So the people who are doing it super successfully, it's not the norm, right? They're the exception.
Yeah, they're not the norm. But like I will say that in order to at least sort of break even, because I think a lot of people are very happy as long as they don't have to come out of pocket anymore. You know, for their podcast. I think break even is something that is very achievable, but like anything, it involves being consistent and takes some time. But in terms of just like a business, I mean, it's a great marketing tool / like what's that term, like loss leader or whatever, which is really really the same thing as like it's a marketing tool in order for you to be able to in order for people to really get to know, you know, either the ethos of the brand, they get to know, you know, what you're doing, why you're doing it. All those things I think are very, very, it can be very, very beneficial, you know. And I think sometimes people, you know, when they're starting a podcast for their business, they, you know, really need to make sure that they're honing in on, you're doing this for a reason.
Okay.
You have a purpose, and there's nothing wrong with, admitting that, yes, you're doing it because you're looking to either attract new clients or for the people that already kind of know you, but maybe haven't purchased your products or services.
Right.
They're getting you're trying to attract them to get them to know you a little bit better, but getting to do it in a more genuine way.
Right. I'll full transparency for me. Like, I love doing, the podcasting. I love it. I think it's fun, but what I love most about it is that I get to be myself and I get to show people like who I am. You know what I mean? Because like when you hear like attorney or, law firm, like people tend to like kind of have a negative connotation in terms of like personality wise. Like there's not like a lot of personality associated with that. So it's like, when you want people to know, yeah, I'm a human, I'm real. Like, I have similar, experiences to you, similar wants and desires to you. And so it does open up and let me do it in a genuine way instead of saying like, hi, I'm Sabine Franco. And,
you don't, instead of you just being like a commercial or, or something like
exactly. Because that doesn't feel good, to be able to like, I hate selly, type of things. And like, I hate if I had to like, just do that. Yeah.
And I think, and the other thing is too, is like, even though like, yes, trying to do a podcast and producing a podcast does take time and it does take money. But I mean, like, if you were to compare the cost of creating a podcast versus running ads on TV all the time or ads on radio, you tell me which one is more cost effective.
Absolutely.
And which one is more enjoyable too, because I feel like it can serve some purpose for you as well, personally as well as professionally. So.
Yeah, 100%. It's definitely rewarding. Yeah. I know you've worked with tons of podcasts. Have you had any experiences that you find like particularly interesting with dealing?
I mean, honestly, like almost every day is, maybe not every day, but there really isn't a week that goes by where I don't hear something interesting. I mean, like I get a chance to literally be, the other cool part about this job is that I'm a guy that loves to learn. So,
that works.
So I love to learn. And just by the nature of sitting in that chair, and for those of you who are watching us, there is a chair over there that you can't see. I'm usually sitting in that chair,
right?
But yeah, I get a chance to learn about all sorts of things. I mean, I get a chance to hear about everything from there are journalists from like and this is not like, to be honest, like I don't really care about like the names of the publications or anything like that, but like the New York Times, Al Jazeera, what's it called? I get to learn about what's it called? There's there's a person who specializes in people who are dominatrixes.
Okay.
So literally I get an education in all these subject matters,
whether you were curious or not,
whether I was curious or not, and the other thing is that I really like, is despite the fact that I am personally, I'm kind of like a hardcore introvert personally, despite the fact that I have to talk to people every single day. But I'm fascinated by people though. And I'm always fascinated by how people think, why they think the things that they think. So, it's given me a lot of insight into just people in general. And and that part is something that has become, whether I wanted it to or not, it's really allows me to be able to connect with like people from all walks of life.
That's dope. Maybe that's why we connect so well, because I love to learn. I am an introvert, although it doesn't seem like it, but I am. And and I am fascinated by learning how people make their way through life, and everybody has a different path. And sometimes you think somebody's path is better than yours, or, the way that the route that they took was more opportunistic or what have you. But it's just like, you can't never walk anybody's walk. You know what I mean? And so I love learning about it. And I always thought that I should have been like a psychology major because like that's where you really learn that stuff. But it's super cool. So you feel like that has sort of like changed your life? Like, are you enjoying what you're doing now?
Yeah, I mean, I really enjoy it in the sense because, like I said, like I get a chance to help people with their content, which is the main thing that gives me the most joy, more so than anything else. Like, is being able to help people with their content, and to be honest with you, it's just like, despite the fact, like, like obviously there are some podcasters that I have in here that, like, you know, they have massive followings. They have very big followings. And, you know, I think some people would think like, oh, I'd be most excited about those clients.
Okay.
And it's not that I'm not excited about those clients, like, and I have good relationships with those clients. But the truth of the matter is the one where I actually have the most enjoyment is the average person that comes off the street. They say they have a podcast, they want to start a podcast, and being able to literally help them step by step to helping them essentially attract to the community that they're trying to create around their podcast. Because that's the thing, you know, I think anyone who's looking to start a podcast, I think a lot of people think about, you know, millions of people watching or viewing or listening. I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, yes, if you have that sort of following, it's great.
That's dope.
That's dope. It's cool. Like, I'm not trying to say that it's not. And they think about, you know, monetization, which is also a very, you know, important thing. It's not something I try to skirt around either, because I think that is something that is obviously very important.
Right.
Whether it's called, if podcasting is something you want to do long term. But the truth of the matter is I just really, really enjoy watching people getting a chance to express themselves the way that they intend to be expressed, and being heard, and then building a community around their content, and then being able to make connections with those people.
Right.
You know, there's been at least, you know, there's been plenty of podcasters that I've, like, I can literally, like, every time I see them now, like, I'm very, very happy with where they've gotten to.
That's awesome.
And it just, you know, just being like hearing stories about like how they connect, how someone stumbled upon their podcast halfway across the world, and they listen to them all the time.
Yeah.
And they really just connect with their content. And to me, like, that's the coolest thing on the planet. Like, you know.
I recently went to Invest Fest, which is Earn Your Leisure's. Everybody knows Earn Your Leisure. I don't have to explain to you who they are. But they've started a very successful podcast 3 years ago, and they just had an event where all of their followers have come to basically together to learn about investing and financial literacy. And like it was such a community, you just felt like you were in the midst of family. And so I get what you're saying. Like, people like-minded, same energy, same, like, you know, wants out of life have connected through this one podcast.
Yeah.
And now, you know, it's basically like a family and a community and a following that you couldn't even, I don't know how else you would create something like that.
Yeah, that sounds pretty cool. Like, I would say that's something, like, personally, like, I'm really big on. And that's not to say that, like, I have made all the smartest financial choices in the world, but like, if there's one thing I could change about, like, you know, things that they should be teaching in public schools and stuff like that, I'm just like, I think we could skip a few classes.
Yes.
You know, because I'm sure you know, and I've heard you talk about, you know, with other guests on your podcast too. Right. It's just like, you know, for all the big financial choices you're going to make in your life, no one ever teaches you. That's supposed to be, I guess, taught at home or something like that. But I'm just like, but you know, but most people's parents don't have that. You know, they only know about that stuff through know, experience maybe, and that's about it.
Exactly. If you're lucky enough for your parent to have had a positive financial experience or financial literacy experience, then that was then passed down to you. But for many of us, we didn't have that. You know what I mean? And so to be able to have people who have walked the walk, they have learned the information, and now wanting to come back and like share it with the community, that's like super awesome. And you said something about like the public schools. I was thinking about that as well, because like my daughter's she's in a private school, but at the same time, she's not getting financial literacy.
Yeah. That's true too. I mean,
you know, and it bothers me. And I'm like, what can I do with that? You know, at this point where she's 8 years old, that could actually like infuse that information into her. And I mean, it really does fall on me, but I wish there was a school system or program or something that, you know, I could utilize. So if you guys know anything, definitely hit me up. Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure she's learning some stuff from you now. I mean, I would say part of the reason, because I mean, starting a business is a relatively, well, I don't want to say scary endeavor, but it's, you know, you're taking a leap of faith to a certain extent.
Right.
And, you know, like my parents, ran a daycare center for a little bit. So like, I think, so like, even though like I didn't learn, I learned a little bit, like I used to do the payroll when I was a kid for them and stuff like that.
I mean, that's big, Josh.
But, you know, I think, you know, even though like I didn't learn half the things that I learned, you know, that I know now from that experience, because I was really young, but I will say, you know, just seeing somebody else do something, you know, at least can give you, be like, well, if they did it, you know, then I can do it.
Yeah. I think you probably underestimate how much value you got from that. that, from that, knowing that they were entrepreneurs and that they were in business, so that you probably had that seed planted. And then you were also exposed to like, there's a method to keeping these finances, to keep these lights on and things like that. So that was probably dope. So what is the future of your business? What do you want out of what do you want this to become?
That's a good question. I've been thinking a lot about that now, because I'm at a point now where, I was at that point kind of last year, right before the pandemic. I was thinking about opening up another location, and that is still something that is I had to put on hiatus, but actually might happen in 2022. There's a strong possibility of that happening. But the main thing that I'm looking forward to right now is just sort of expanding the services, because one of the things is like, as you know, like I talk to people, I talk to you after every session to kind of give you like the, Joe Clark lean on me speech.
Yes, he does. As soon as we wrap, I'm like, okay, Josh, lay it on me. What did I do?
Try to give you a pep talk and everything like that. But what I realized is like that was good when I was first starting out. But as your business grows and everything like that, I realized that's not something that's sustainable long term. As the more clients that you get, I'm like, I can't afford the time to be able to do that all the time.
With everyone.
So like even right now, I've been working on a video series, a very like introductory video series for anybody that's looking to start a podcast. I think a lot of people tend to focus on like, don't get me wrong, like, yes, you should have a marketing strategy. You should plan all these things, blah, 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 whatever. But, you having dealt with me, I focus on the content because I think at the end of the day, and I'm also like I'm very blunt, I'm kind, but I'm very blunt. I'm very blunt about this subject matter in particular, is because I think a lot of people when they start a podcast, because most people, there's like a statistic out there where like most people don't make it past like episode 5 or 6 or something like that. Like most people, because they realize they're not getting the traction that they thought. And they realize it's a lot more work, because doing a podcast, for anybody that's interested out there, it is like, it's very fun. It is really, really fun, but it is like a part-time job, as you well know.
It is a job, yeah. I definitely, before I started, spoke to my friends at Earn Your Leisure, and they were just kind of, giving me the background of all the things that kind of goes into it. And so I kind of knew a little bit about what it was going to take, but I am sort of proud of myself that we're at episode 9. You know what I mean? Like,
and I think you're off to a good start. Like, honestly,
Thank you.
And the thing is, like, I don't say these things lightly either. Now I lost my train. What was I talking about?
You were saying how it's a lot of work in doing a podcast.
Oh yeah, so it's a lot of work, and if you're interested in it's a lot of work, and if you're interested in doing a podcast, I wanted to create this video introduction series for people to really focus on how they can get off on the best foot with their content, because when it's not working for you in the beginning, and don't get me wrong, like in the beginning, if you don't already have like a built-in audience with whatever you do, either professionally or personally, then you're not going to have a lot of people out there viewing and listening to you in the beginning. That's natural for the most part. However, if you keep doing these things, let's say you're at episode 100 and you have the same following. Yes, it could be a marketing thing, but 99% of the time it's probably because your content's not good enough. And
how do they? So your series is going to help people work on that.
Yeah. It's really going to help people work on trying to refine their content. And, when you first start off, like, it's not going to be perfect. I'm kind of like a perfectionist in that way, where like, I always want to put my best foot forward, and you should. Yes. I'm not trying to say like you're not going to, but just also give yourself some leeway in knowing that you're going to get better as this thing goes along, especially if you've never made content before. Like, you're not going to be perfect first time out. There's a lot of like super famous podcasters out here who have millions of followers. And if you ever listen to episode 1, it was complete trash. And they'll be the first person to tell you that. Right. They'll be the first ones to say that, like, my first episodes, my first 10 episodes, my first 11, 12, 13 episodes were not great, you know?
Right.
But, eventually they figured it out, you know?
with a lot of things like consistency and perseverance, not giving up. You just definitely build that muscle. And I think for me, like one of the life lessons that I learned from all the things that I've been through is the consistency.
Yeah,
so like
key.
Yeah, it's
very,
key.
very
like
key.
I knew that if I wasn't consistent with it, or if I, gave up too soon, obviously it's not gonna sort of work. And so that's one of the things that I brought into this, that okay, no, I'm going to be consistent no matter how bad it is. I'm going to keep going till it's great. Yeah. Awesome. So where can they find your course, or when do you think it'll be out, your series?
So I think it'll probably be out. So today is September 1st. It'll probably be out hopefully next week on our website.
Oh, dope.
So right now it's just going to be on our website.
Okay.
Which is brooklynpodcastingstudio.com. So
okay.
I'm not sure what I've decided to call the page, whether it's free advice or resource center or something like that. But pretty much there will be about, I want to say anywhere between 3 to 4 videos there for pretty much brand new podcasters. But to be honest with you, like even if you've been doing podcasting for a while, because the other thing is too, is like I meet people who've been podcasting for a while too. And I see them make a lot of, for lack of better words, like rookie mistakes.
Okay.
And it's really just because nobody's mentioned it to them, told them, or they either that or they're not hearing the advice from somebody else.
You know how that goes.
But yeah, I think that's something that that will be very, very useful for people to check out. And to be honest with you, if you're looking to start a podcast, whether you live in New York City, whether you're looking to book a session at my studio or not, to be honest with you, I don't care if you book a session at the studio. You can check that stuff out, and if it helps you, I'm happy.
Okay,
like that's all I really care about.
Dope,
like it's
dope.
not.
So that's some free info, and I promise you, it's going to be valuable, very valuable content, because Josh gives a lot of good insight. So check out the website, Brooklyn Podcasting Studio, so you can get your free gems. That's going to help you.
Yeah, trust me. Like there are things on there if you're looking to start a podcast. Like, I've never looked at myself as quote unquote, like, there are some people that are like, oh yeah, you're like a podcast guru,
right? Yeah.
Or anything like. I don't call myself that. Like, I don't.
He is a podcast guru. I will vouch for that.
But what I am is just someone who I've sat in at this point. I've probably recorded, just so people understand, like I've probably recorded at this point over 200 different podcasts, like just period. And in terms of podcast sessions,
I was gonna say
maybe close to 2,000.
Wow.
Like,
wow.
So like I've sat in on a lot of podcasts, and I could have sat there and not listened, but I listen to people. I listen to people's content all the time, regardless of whether it's good or bad.
Yeah.
And I don't let them walk out the door without telling them something about their content, as long as they give me the chance to do so.
Yeah, as long as they give you permission.
Listen, I do ask.
Awesome, Josh. This was awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time out to, speak with me, share with my audience. Yeah. Is that the only place you want them to find you, at Brooklyn Podcasting Studio?
Yeah, so the website's brooklynpodcastingstudio.com. If you're, like I said, in about a week or to 10 days from now, you'll see those videos up. Any information about the studio is also up on the website as well. If you also want to check out and see some of the podcasters that are at our studio, like Sabine, you can also check out our Instagram, which is Brooklyn Podcasting, all together on IG. And I think we also have a Twitter account, but to be honest with you, I don't think I've tweeted to that thing in about a good year and some change. And I don't even remember what the handle is. But I would say mostly on IG, and same thing on Facebook too. But yeah, mostly on IG. You can come check us out.
Awesome. I almost forgot. I wanted to do the lightning round, which I call right quick. So I'm going to say a word. You know how it goes, and you'll tell me what comes to mind. So the first thing is wisdom.
Mom. Yeah.
Nice.
My mom is the wisest person. I mean, she's like, I think like any good mom or whatever, like you think there are things that she's told me as a child that have come back that I'm like just now starting to, to get and understand. So yeah, mom.
Okay. Love.
I'd say my wife.
I was gonna say, Josh, if you don't mention your wife.
That's it. I would just say my wife. I mean, I would still call it like, yeah, she's been so supportive of everything that I do. And she's honest with me too. That's the other thing.
That's key.
And she's very honest with me. Like that's the other thing too. It's like it's one thing to be supportive, but support without the honesty, can kind of things can kind of go south. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Next one is fun.
Fun. Skating. That's actually So what's it called? Skating is my thing that I do that is my release.
Oh, okay.
That is the thing that I actually, like podcasting, music has always been a passion of mine, but skating is absolutely the most fun thing for me.
So this is inline skates?
Yeah.
Okay.
So for people who aren't familiar with like the term aggressive inline skating from the 90s, like I was that person and still am that person.
Gotcha.
Jumping gaps, grinding rails. They used to do all that sort of stuff.
Wow.
Yeah, if you want to call it extreme skating, I guess you can call it that.
Man, I'm already at the end. I wish I knew this in the beginning. That's dope. That's dope. Okay, and finally, don't mess with.
That's a good question. Man, there's so many things. I'm like coffee, food. Don't mess with. I would just say don't mess with the people I care about.
Okay, I like
don't
that.
Don't mess with the people.
Or his coffee or his food.
Yeah.
Don't miss that one.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Josh. This was so much fun.
I really appreciate it.
you.
Appreciate it. It was a lot of fun.
All right, thanks.